As sports history fans, we often reminisce about the legends. Willis Reed limping onto the NBA Finals court, Kurt Schilling's bloody sock, Kerry Strug's courageous dismount, and so many more. These moments often define sports history. But what about the countless injuries that did not become legends, or careers that were derailed due to inadequate care? That's where this episode's sponsor comes in. Introducing to you, ILP Sports Consultants, your trusted sports injury partner, available 24/7. Brian Maelli at ILP Sports Consultants has over 20 years of experience in the orthopedic and sports medicine industry, and he has worked with athletes across the gamut, from youth to amateurs, professionals, in almost every sport played in the United States of America, accommodating athletes at every stage of their career. This adaptability ensures that ILP services are perfectly tailored to your skill level, no matter where you are in your athletic journey. With ILP, you are in control. Choose the steps that matter most to you. Diagnosis, treatment plan, recovery, or the whole journey. ILP services are tailored to your unique needs. Rushing for care is a common pitfall, leading to future problems. ILP Sports Consultants helps you make the right decisions, ensuring that you receive timely and safe care. And here's a bonus. Brian hosts the Injured List podcast, sharing insights and athlete stories you won't want to miss. Whether you're a concerned parent or grandparent, or an athlete yourself seeking guidance, ILP Sports Consultants is your beacon of hope in sports injury management. Visit ilpsports.com today. That's the letters ilpsports.com. ILP Sports Consultants, where your well-being is the priority and your recovery is the mission. Choose ILP Sports Consultants for a healthier sports journey, helping you get back in the game the smart way.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats, football history and its memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats Publishing and Broadcasting Network, in conjunction with Swick Enterprises. We're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats magazine, and I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America that focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 140-plus years of football history and memorabilia, and you can find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. It's at this time I'd like to introduce my co-host, a senior contributing writer, Gridiron Greats magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Larger. He hails from Portland, Oregon, Mr. Joe Squires. And waiting for Joe to call in. He'll be in a few minutes. And until that time, I'd like to welcome everybody to our podcast for this evening. A couple points to make before and while we're waiting for Joe to come on. The NFL draft was this past week, and as such, we saw some very interesting picks with regards to the teams picking up players, so on and so forth. Very interesting to see who got it, but more interesting was seeing it on a, lack of a better term, virtual type of draft where we saw individuals in their homes with regards to getting drafted, their talks, their stories, so on and so forth. Very interesting to watch, very interesting to see. The one thing I did have a good laugh about was the looking at Patriots coach Bill Belichick and his area of his home with his dog in front of his computer. quite funny to say the least, and it added a lot of levity to the actual draft itself. I know a couple of people commented on it afterwards to me, saying about there was a great deal of personal touches, to say the least, with regards to the draft itself. So therefore, it made for an interesting view, an interesting frame of the draft itself. A couple other points to touch upon while we're waiting for Joe. The latest issue of Gridiron Greats magazine was in the mail, delivered, and a lot of people enjoyed our front cover, so on and so forth. And I think Joe's available now. Joe, are you there?
I am, Bob. I apologize. I've got the distractions going on with working from home for COVID.
All right, Joe's here, and we'll get started a couple minutes into our program. Joe, how are you this afternoon?
I'm hectic. I apologize, Bob. I literally, it's not funny. I don't like letting you down, but
no
literally
problem.
The working from home stuff. So, doing good. Otherwise, just tracking a couple auctions that are coming down the pike. Heritage has a big one coming up that we talked about. Mile High just opened one up, and then there's a Huggins and Scott one that's coming up pretty quick. Huggins, is usually good for a couple of really good, esoteric items. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Joe, are you there? Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I'm here.
Okay. You cut out for a second there. All right.
Oh, yeah. I apologize. I apologize.
No problem. It's going to be it will be interesting to see that auction coming up. But I was talking briefly about, I was waiting for about the NFL draft, which was virtually held over the past week. And any comments on that?
Oh, I'll admit I watched it. The Seattle Seahawks, my team, they had a very low draft. I think I mentioned that to you in a text yesterday. But it's hard to get excited when you're like the number 23 draft. And I don't know if you saw that on the Vintage Football chat room we belong to. Somebody graded all of the drafts for the teams, and the Seahawks got a C. And you're kind of shaking your head. I don't know. Did you follow the draft? Were you following along with Green Day's pick?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of shocked in a way of the first pick with Love as the quarterback, and now all the theories are coming out that Rodgers may have outstayed his welcome, yada yada yada, and then the other part, Rodgers reached out to Love, welcoming on board, so on and so forth, and I've heard both sides of the story. I got friends in with the Packers, and they've expressed their thoughts and ideas. And this is what it comes down to. Aaron Rodgers is 36 years old. How many more years is he realistically going to play? He's not a Tom Brady as far as his physique is concerned. I have no problem. I have no problem with Brady going to Tampa Bay for a couple of reasons. Number one, Tom wants a new challenge. Number two, he's going to go to a warm climate. Number three, it's a franchise that rolled out the red carpet for him to come down there. It's a good franchise, contrary to what a lot of people believe. And Rodgers is not a Brady. And okay, so if Rodgers plays for another year and they don't go to the Super Bowl, so what's the next plan? What's going to happen in the future? And Rodgers can't dictate to the Packers, this is the way it's going to be if you want me to play. That's not going to happen. And I think some of his questionable antics are coming out right now, because last year they were one game away, and you know what? They didn't win.
Yeah.
And when you're playing football, winning is everything. I don't care what anybody says. There's no award for second place.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I remember. I remember sending you a text once of I saw somebody wearing a Seattle Seahawk 2005 NFC champion jacket. And I'm like, don't brag about being the NFC champion. Don't brag about coming in second place and winning the Super Bowl. You don't brag about that. I mean, you can hang the banners in your stadium, but it's the gold medal or it's nothing.
Foolish. Yeah, it's foolish. I wouldn't want to go around and say, "Oh man, I got we got to one game before the Super Bowl." Well, big deal. You didn't get in the Super Bowl, and when you get in the Super Bowl, you better win it. He's only got one Super Bowl.
Yeah, in his entire career. Yeah, I got to say, though, Aaron Rodgers Green Bay has had such an amazing run of franchise quarterbacks from Favre blipping right into Rodgers. It is hard to come across that franchise quarterback. I mean, there are probably half a dozen teams in the NFL who've got, marquee-style quarterbacks. The rest of them are always on the hunt. So Rodgers is probably a starting quarterback at half the NFL teams. I mean, I don't know. I mean, my son today asked me how many teams haven't won a Super Bowl, and I was like, most of them actually. And he's like, well, how many have the Seahawks won? And I'm like, just one. We're 1 for 3. You begin to realize how rare it is to even win one Super Bowl in today's NFL environment, where with free agency, et cetera. So I mean, for a storied career like Rodgers to get one ring, you may think that's tough, and hey, we should have got more, but also it's hard to get just one. Brett Favre had just one. Tom Brady's the anomaly, not the norm. I'm happy with Russell Wilson at Seattle. He's a franchise quarterback. In the years before that, we had Matt Hasselbeck, who was an amazing quarterback, but not, not that marquee quarterback.
Right.
We got him when we stole Holmgren from Green Bay. He was holding a clipboard for Brett Favre for many years. But I don't know, it's tough because, I'm hearing the chatter from you and a couple other Green Bay fans about Rodgers, et cetera. And, Rodgers might not be, the way he was but, he's still an amazing quarterback. And Green Bay's been spoiled with, 2 decades of amazing Hall of Fame quarterbacks. So,
I think
Tampa
what
Bay.
It is, I think what it is with Rodgers is his rough edges are getting tiring to the organization. And again, when you push McCarthy out the way you did, I don't really think, and McCarthy had faults too. I don't deny that. But when your star quarterback is saying, I need a new coach, I need a new guy, yada, yada, yada. Well, okay, you got it. You didn't win. So what do you want to do now? What's plan B? That's what it comes down to. We're waiting. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say New England's about to find out what it's like not to have a marquee quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
And,
exactly.
They're about to drift into that quagmire of mediocrity for a couple of years until they find it. I don't want to see Green Bay do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go back on to our script here, where we're going to talk a little bit about the 1977 Topps set. Very interesting set. I remember it well. I remember buying packs of it. I remember quasi-good correlation. I went through my notes this afternoon trying to see if I wrote anything about it. I really didn't write anything about them. I know I bought packs. I've never bought a wax box of it. But I know there's a card in particular you like, Joe, in that set. And I'll hand off to you on that.
It is literally one of the only cards that I have memorized. And it's the 1977 Topps number 177 Steve Largent rookie card, and I've single-handedly skewed the population reports for this core set. If you look at the if you look at the PSA submissions, there's almost 4 times as many cards submitted for this one card than any other card in the set. It's the number 1 submitted card. it's almost comical. And somebody told me once, it's like you are the sole reason for it. And they're right. It was back in 2005, 2006 when I was putting together a Steve Largent Master Set, and there was only 3 PSA 10s in existence, and I was trying to get a PSA 10. And so I was buying 9s and resubmitting them. I was buying raws and submitting them, and I just began to know the card. And it's that card. And if there's a card, if there's a set that I know a lot about, it's the 48 Leaf. If there's one card that I know every nuance, it's that card. I know there's a little green dot on the right side of his nose that's a print defect that keeps it out of a PSA 10 holder a lot. It's pretty fascinating. Do you have any cards? I mean, what's your card that you know, Bob, that you know every nuance about it? I mean,
Well, I think for me it's more some cards from the 60s. I know the 65 Tall Boy set. I studied that set over and over again, and the Phillies from 65 to 67, especially the 67 set, because I was so fascinated with that yellow in the set and the brown on the back. It was just a fascinating card set for me to continue to analyze and look at over and over again. But my Tall Boys are something I just love looking at. Again, I probably memorized it back then. Now it's more memory for me than anything else. So it was a heck of a long time ago. But at the same time, when I look at that set in my binder, or I look at the duplicates I got on it, I said, man, oh man, it's just some great memories to it, to say the least. And again, I vaguely remember in the Phillies, when I bought the Philly packs, the 65, 66, and 67 Philadelphia NFL cards, I always remembered their collation was very, very good, meaning that I would get different cards in different packs. And I had no conceptualization of what a set was, putting the set together. So I didn't know I need, 198 cards for the set. I had no clue. I just opened the cards. And I just, put them in the box. I had a shoe box, and I used to put them according to the year. And that's the way I collected for many, many years until I figured out in the 70s that there were actual sets. And I had X amount of cards in the set. And to try to put the set together, which I didn't start really until the mid 70s. I'd say 75 up. So in your case, you had a two-folded. What's a good word to use? Just a great segue into collecting with 77 tops, your favorite team and your favorite player. I mean, what's better than that? I mean, that's great.
And it's such a fun set. Yeah, it's such a good set. I mean, the 78 and 79 card, I was too young. I didn't open, 77 wax. 78 is the first wax I started opening, and then 79 is where I went heyday. So I know the 79 set the best, and the Largent card out of that 79 set is one of my favorites. But I'm not a big stat head. There's a lot of people who have stats memorized, like, oh yeah, that person threw for X and this many catches. I know Steve Largent broke Don Hudson's 99 touchdown, 99 touchdown reception in a career record with 100. But other than that, I don't know many stats to Steve Largent. I know he broke the consecutive games with a catch record that was held by Harold Carmichael, but then he barely held these records because he retired the same year he set that 100-yard touchdown. Then Jerry Rice was right behind him, and 2 years later Jerry Rice broke the record. So I mean, it was we had a guest on a couple weeks ago who mentioned Steve Largent benefited from stricter pass interference rules right when he joined the NFL. He spent 2 years, bumping and grinding with Lester Hayes on the Oakland Raiders, before, they weren't allowed to bump him for 5 yards. And then, it's the proliferation of the pass game in the NFL. It's why people tune in.
And what I find interesting too, the evolution of the back of the football card when the explosion hit in 1989, I still liked reading the back of the card. I wanted to see what stats were there, and so on and so forth. And I pretty much always read the back of the cards. And then when the explosion hit, it's like the back of the card was just like an afterthought. So we'll just throw anything we want on the back of the card and be done with it. And I'm saying to myself, wow, you really eliminated 50% of the card by not having any statistics or having so ridiculous write-ups in the back. It wasn't even funny.
Yeah.
And it really lost a lot of the glamour of the football cards. And you go into Topps, and again for full sets, I stopped at their last year, 2015. I look at that and I say to myself, man, the card backs really were somewhat consistent, but yet not every year was included, so on and so forth. There was a combo stats or whatever the case may be. It took a lot of the glamour of the card and discarded it for a whole generation of collectors who would buy those cards. You know what I mean? You and I go back to where you had real stats on the card, and you read them, you studied them, you memorized them, so on and so forth. I mean, that was just part of collecting.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun flipping cards over and reading about them, the little comic draws, drawings, etc. So. Yeah,
it's really a part of our hobby that is very overlooked and very forgotten today. I like looking at the back of cards, and again, to me, the classic, the 50s and the 60s and 70s write-ups were classic write-ups, and you really had a lot of information, a lot of great facts, stats, so on and so forth, in an era where you didn't have stats readily available, but just typing on a computer and you're getting every conceivable statistic for any player known to mankind. So, much different time frame.
I said I wasn't a stat head, but I kind of am. I mean, there's, it amazes me that, for example, they talk about Ray Nitschke and who's the sack leader. But they didn't track sacks until later on, said there's so many stats that are missing. Who was it? Todd Tobias was talking once that he discovered that a record that Lance Allworth held was incorrect because he missed a pass or it's interesting that they just weren't tracking very well back then. So no, it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Different time. Just like I said about a week ago, I'd longed for the NFL draft and AFL drafts where they pulled out their Street and Smiths and picked guys off of that. Instead of what we have today, the complete over analysis of a player to the point that I would venture to say probably their statistical evidence and their analysis is probably, if they're lucky, right 50% of the time. It's that high. You know what I mean? So here's what it is, and that's it. And we'll move on. It's at this time I'd like to welcome our special guest. He's a football and baseball historian. He's a member of the Professional Football Research Association, and he's also host of Beyond the Game, which is seen in White Plains, New York, and online. I'd like to welcome a good friend of mine to the show this evening, Mr. John Verperian. John, welcome to the show.
Bob, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm looking forward to chatting with you and Joe as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you,
John. Thanks for coming on. John, thanks for being on. I want to point out to our audience, John and I are switching roles now. I've been on John's show several times. I've made the journey to White Plains and gone in the studio, and we've recorded. We've had some excellent shows. And it's very much, it's almost like a crossfire of football as Joe snaps questions to me and I respond as fast as possible. And we try to cram everything in a very limited amount of time. So we're kind of the same way here, only I cheat. I give you the questions in advance, so it's something different.
Okay.
John.
Well, I brought some pictures along. So just tell me, where do I point them to the camera?
The infamous non-camera podcast that we don't have. Yeah, I know that feeling. I always got to figure out what I didn't bring to the last show. I got to bring to the next show, and I can show it on your camera there. Joe, leading off, how did you get started in following football?
I would have to say at the tender age of 8 years old at the kitchen table, my mom would clip regularly the New York Daily News, predict the college football scores, and I just noticed she really had a knack for that. She was a great football lover, and naturally, the hand that rocks the cradle had some influence. Her teams were Notre Dame, coached by Ara Parsegian, and the New York Football Giants, because she went to Stanford High School over in Stamford, Connecticut, and there was this guy there who went to a small college called Arnold and wore the number 81 for the Giants. So that's why she loved Big Blue. And my dad was also gave me some exposure to football. He was a soccer player. That's the sport I played in high school. But as to spectating and going to games, he was in the commercial carpeting industry. And one of the early corporations that embraced sports marketing was Allied Chemical, one of his suppliers. So it was not uncommon to have Monday luncheon where the football players would come and the suits from the industry would meet and greet them and have break bread and listen to the latest as to what happened on the gridiron on Sunday. So I was, like I said, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, mature kid because I wore my Sunday school outfit going to these events with my dad. And it was not till I was an adult with a house and my wife telling me, you got to clean up some of the stuff in your office. And I went through, and I didn't even realize I had signed menus, and I started looking at the names, and I saw Howard Cosell, Joe Namath. As a kid, a guy in a suit signing paper, you don't identify it readily. You do recognize it when you see a jersey and the number and the helmet and the action on Sunday. But I was blown away at some of the players that were at these events. So that's how I got hooked onto football, and that's the long and short of it.
Now, for our audience, and Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who was number 81 for the Blue? Do you know?
Andy Rubistelli.
No, I'm asking Joe. I'm putting Joe under.
Joe on the spot. I thought you said Joe. Oh.
No.
It was obviously Andy Rubistelli.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. You got to be prepared.
I would not have known.
Quick quizzes tonight, Joe.
John, thank you. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. I did not know. That's pretty cool. You name dropped some pretty good names in there. I've spent the last couple days just watching some of your shows. It's amazing, and thank you for doing it. How did I think the earliest date I saw for a show was 1996. But can you give us a little bit of background on how you got started Beyond the Game?
Okay, yeah. The program actually started in March of 2002. I contacted a friend of mine by the name of Harry Stein. He's an author of several books, as well as writing for Playboy and some other periodicals. But he had a baseball fiction book called Hoopla. And the idea behind Beyond the Game was it was supposed to be a baseball themed program focusing on all the baseball activities and history within the metropolitan New York City area. And by the fifth show, fifth taping, I realized, I don't have to just stick to like a Harry Stein and talking to him about hoopla and the 1919 Black Sox scandal, and I can expand it into other sports, and that's how I started getting into football and other athletic endeavors.
Yeah, I noticed quite a few of your, you had a swath of guests from Olympic, medalists, baseball, football. I mean, it's such a good swath of guests. Yeah.
Well, what's great for those folks from the sports world is the theme of Beyond the Game is, we talk sports and allow a segue in for the athlete, the coach, or the former player. What do you do if you're doing something now, whether it be a business endeavor, whether it be a charity? It allows them to talk about it. A good example is Tim Flannery, who played for the San Diego Padres. He was able to talk about his country music albums and the like. Mm-hmm. And with somebody, I'll tell you, I was blown away. I was going through, since there's so many authors, publishers send me stuff, and a literary publisher sent me this information about a poet, and I was surprised to see who it was. Called up the agent for the literary publisher, said I'd be interested in interviewing him, explained the concept of the show, and I put the phone in the cradle. Next thing I know, the phone is ringing. I pick it up, and this guy, he coached in the CFL, and he brought a former AFL team, now in the AFC, to the Super Bowl 4 times. And in an alternate universe, they would have won 4 times. I had Marv Levy on the phone asking me, hey, John, what is this Beyond the Game all about? And it's not just sports. And, so we talked about his book, It's Time for a Rhyme, but also when I had him on, there were a few questions about Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, and the Bills, and also, what it's like coaching up in Montreal. So it's allowed me a lot of great opportunities to get the oral history of the gridiron game.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely true with the guests that you have on, and you have such a wide variety of guests, and in all sports, but in particular, looking at the guests that you had in football over the years, and I'm honored that you asked me to be on several times, and I enjoyed it. Enjoyed immensely being on the show because to me it's bringing to light something that may not be known to the general public watching it at the same time. And I know a lot of people watch shows that they may not have a lot of interest in, but at the same time they watch it and say, hey, this is something interesting. I'm going to watch this again. I never knew such and such about such and such a person, so on and so forth. So along those same lines, John, how do you go about getting guests for your show?
I'm not shy. I'll cold call someone. I'm shocked at the number of football former players from the 70s and 80s, 60s who are out there, and their information as to home phones and stuff is public knowledge. They're in the book. I mean, I literally one of my favorite interviews that just happened this year, because the team is moving to Vegas, I wanted to get an Oakland Raider on, and I was able to pick up the phone and get a hold of Pete Banaszak, and we had a grand time. Yeah, I talked to him about the Heidi game, the Holy Roller, but after the interview, he shared with me that, John, you're not like most sports reporters. And what he meant by that was, and again, this is sort of the theme of Beyond the Game, I actually peppered him questions about his interscholastic athletic achievements. In high school in Wisconsin, he was the state champion for discus. We don't think of Pete Benezak, the man that John Madden relied upon to get the tough yardage in the 3-1, 3-2 situations as a track star, and that's something he enjoyed talking about. So that's the whole thing, that some of these football players or sports athletes are used to just being left in a box, and my thinking is, well, let's go beyond the box. Let's talk about some other things. So and I think word of mouth is another way of getting folks onto the show. And the sports world universe is small, and people do talk. And it's also great when a guest is a producer for me. I mean, Upton Bell, Burt Bell's son, who's I had him on the show. Upton, I now consider a friend because he calls me whenever he wants to let me know something that has happened on Sunday, and he wants to give me a quick assessment. I mean, after the early 2 games that are played on Sunday, it's not unusual around 7 o'clock I get a phone call from Upton. But the point of the story is that on one of those calls where I was just lamenting to him that, this guy, R.D. Rosen, I know he's written this book on Sid Luckman, and for the life of me, his website is down. It doesn't look like he's got anybody picking it up. And like Upton said to me, John, I saw Sid Luckman play, and apparently I guess Upton also had given some information about Luckman to R.D. Rosen. Next thing I know, R.D. Rosen was a guest on Beyond the Game. So that's how I go about it, cold calling or, word of mouth. And if you treat people right and all, your reputation, is able to produce stuff. But
that's great.
Yeah, yep.
Brought up some great stuff. For me, I name drop Bob Swick, and that opens a lot of doors. People don't know who I am.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That Gridiron Greats magazine, I have to say, I do get it. I do enjoy it because I still I collect stuff, and I'm also intrigued by seeing what other people want to put in their sports war room, and it gives me a good handle on stuff. And remembering the past is also a good thing because football, the equipment has changed, but some of the concepts and tactics haven't. So it's interesting to see, and it sort of sparked my interest with taking a look back at the 60s, and 1960s, that is, and I'm beginning to think that some of the stuff, and you guys were talking about it earlier, what the receivers and defensive backs were doing, there was a lot of hand-to-hand combat that was A-OK, and a lot of stuff that probably would draw a flag today that, it makes me wonder what are the right way of looking at stats now versus then. So, anyhow.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting what you brought up about just asking. Probably about a year and change ago, I have a friend who's a football collector but also has a real estate podcast. And I asked him, how he got his guests, and he's like, think of the best people in the industry, the people that you think are untouchable, and then just work your way up to it. Because maybe you watch out for that backing up truck. Maybe you know an assistant, maybe you know a friend, whatever it is, but at some point you can whittle it away, and it was pretty interesting. And right after that, Bob and I talked, and we just came up with some big lists, and we started dialing for dollars, and for better or worse, some of them aren't very articulate, and charismatic on shows, but for better or worse, we started getting some industry guests, but. Speaking of guests, I watched a couple shows. Like you had a show where you had like Lawrence Taylor on. of all things.
Actually,
is,
Harry Carson. I've done a show with Dave Faulkner, who wrote a book on LT. But Harry Carson was the giant who came in. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
The studio. Maybe I better go back and check the website. The studio may have switched titles because the LT was Dave Faulkner, but Harry Carson was a guest. I'm sorry. So I didn't mean.
Now there wasn't a link to that one. I was going off of, and it was an old picture, so it looked like LT. But I don't know. It's just you. Who do you think are the best guests you've had on? And between Bob and I, some of our favorite guests haven't been big name people. They've been people who can tell a story. And and I noticed you haven't had Steve Largent on your show, so I assume that's your white whale that you're working up to.
Well, I'll tell you. I was expecting this, Joe, but I'll share with you this. As to writing, I have to say that when you go to Scribner's for their Sports Encyclopedia of American Lives, and you look up the bio entry for Steve Largent, I'm the author of that chapter in that encyclopedia, and it does have my byline in it. So, that was one of the first football writings that I ever did, and it got published. A lot of baseball stuff, but I'm now moving over to more football writing. But the best guest, oh, wow, I think you're absolutely right. Some of the authors, they can really give you so much information. This is probably two that come to mind immediately is Chris Serb, who did a book recently, a recent release called War in Football, and it focuses on that time period around the World War I era and military service football teams and the like. And then another gent who wrote a book on The Pack is Back. I'm shamelessly capitulating to Bob here, but Joe Zagorski's book on the Packers, that was a lot of nifty stuff in it. So,
wow.
But I have done, the other.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was gonna say I know Joe's got a book out on the Kansas City Chief, Willie Lanier, and as an AFL guy, I'm looking forward to reading that.
We had Joe. We had Joe as a guest on the show. He was very interesting with his insight on all his books. It was very, very interesting, to say the least.
Very cool guy. Very cool.
Yeah. But also I've done a number of location shoots. We've been able to get out of the studio, and I was thinking, we've the show's gone to NFL Films, and we were at Giant Stadium for I want to say a UFL game. It was I know that I was standing on the sidelines next to Denzel Washington, and the Sacramento team. The running back who was coming in on third downs was John David Washington, who, as we all know, has left the football world and has gone into acting and was the star in Black Klansman. But I've been able to cover women's football. Went to a New York Sharks practice in one of the 5 boroughs in New York City. We did a show connected to that. Also in my home city, last year there was an arena football team and had the owner come into the studio. And, of course, we naturally were over at the Westchester County Center capturing content and interviewing fans and some of the football action that was going on there. So it's just been one thing after another, just being blessed. I think another show, I don't know if it's on the website because we switched over from video to computer and DVDs and the like, but one I did in 2009 was with Test. That's an organization based in New Jersey, and they essentially prep your college athlete to do well at the combine, to up their draft visibility. And 2 fellows came in from Florida Atlantic. They were both hoping to be the first ever drafted by an NFL club from that school, Franz Joseph and Gervonta Jackson. And they did not get drafted. However, they did get signed as free agents. Franz Joseph got signed by the Raiders, and Gervonta, which led to an interesting thing off camera, because I before we went on, I turned to him and I said, "How do I pronounce your first name?" And both guys started cracking up, saying, we knew it. You were going to ask him that. You were going to ask him that before the red light came on. So, but he went to the Eagles. No surprise there, because actually his cousin was a starting offensive lineman on the Eagles at that time. So so they were hoping, for some skill set to run in the family there. So that was pretty much an interesting experience, talking with these guys on the eve of the draft. Sort of relates earlier what you guys are talking about in the way of the virtual draft we just saw. But, what was it like, and all the preparation that they went into to just raise their stock to hopefully get tapped by one of the 32 teams.
Yeah. Did he get signed on as a free agent?
Well, I can tell you, Franz was the more interesting angle, because actually he was on I want to say something like a Hard Knocks. He was very frank and honest with the Dolphins and the Cowboys. They showed him working out with those teams and being asked the question, because he was tested positive for a substance which is now legal in many of the states of America, and just being asked that question over and over again, it's like, good golly. And he was honest. Wow. He did go with the Raiders, which made some sense to me, that Al Davis would be like, hey, just win, baby, and did end up in the CFL for a season and a half with another team with them. So in other words, his Raider stint was not a full season, but I do know that he moved up north and played Canadian football.
Nice. Oh. Jen, do you have any new articles or books, ideas for your future writing? And off script just a bit, I think people don't realize the sheer amount of football action and history that's generated from the tri-state area, being New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. It's an amazing history if you really look at it and really think about it. And I know, living in Connecticut, I have a lot of football history here, and 90 miles down the road to Manhattan, I got the 5 boroughs there and their history, and then hop over the bridge to the Meadowlands over there. So it's a pretty intensive area for football history and football stories and so on and so forth. It's amazing. So, and you're in the middle of it there in White Plains, close enough to the boroughs and close enough to the other 2 states also at the same time. So it's very interesting. But getting back, are you working on any articles? Or I know you did an article for us a few issues back. Anything coming up?
Anything coming up? For right now, doing book reviews for BoxScoreNews.com. I just finished one that's posted up on my web page there, called Blanton's Browns. That's done by Roger Gordon, who was also a guest on the show. And for myself, I'm just waiting for McFarland Press to release another PFRA Great Team Series book. I was involved with the 66 Packers book, wrote the Bart Starr chapter. The 58 Colts, I wrote and got to correspond with Raymond Berry. And now just waiting for the 51 Rams book to be released, which looks like June of 2021. And I handled the Rams logo and uniform design chapter, as well as, naturally, Andy Rubistelli. So that was and what I hope to do, my understanding is, and I don't believe I'm letting out any state secrets, the next great team project may very well be the 1964 Buffalo Bills. And I've already got dibs on the Mad Bomber, as well as the Dancing Bear, who was another guest on my show, Ron McDowell, who played for the Bills, as well as George Allen's Over the Hill Gang, Washington Redskins. And that's the writing so far. But you're absolutely right, Bob. A lot of history here. The county government is going to spend $24 million in fixing up Memorial Field in Mount Vernon, New York. Why is that important to football fans? Well, we got to remember we go back to the 60s, that field was the home for, I'm blanking out as to the name, but they were a minor league affiliate to the New York Giants. And that minor league club who played at Memorial Field had a running back, another guest on the show who strictly talked about the Ice Bowl, but Chuck Mersine played on that field for the minor league team. The New York, I think I want to call them the New York Bulls. I have to Google that. So or maybe Joe would know it even. So
Yeah, I'm good for a certain swath of history, and then other than that, if the Chicago Bears with the Red Grange and kind of Jim Thorpe are where I specialized in. I just watched a bunch of documentaries on the Green Bay Packers that somebody posted up. That was pretty fascinating. But we've mentioned quite a few sports. I mean, like I said, I saw an Olympic, an Olympian, baseball on your show, and then obviously you've evolved into the greatest, game, football. Do you collect anything? I mean, Bob and I are both collectors. Our show is kind of a collector's show.
I had as a youngster collected a lot of stuff, and then unfortunately, or fortunately, I got to about high school age, senior, and going into college. At that point in time, all of a sudden, I took a real anathema, an aversion to sports in general, and big involved with politics and government and girls. So it was like, hey, let's get rid of this stuff. So now what I'm collecting is I'm trying to backtrack. I had at one point in time a Fran Tarkington football board game that I used to play as a kid, but that was one of the items that got booted out of here. And now I study eBay religiously and look for stuff that I had, and was able to garner the Vince Lombardi football game, which was the spin-off from the Fran Tarkington. So that's essentially where I'm at. And also I do have obtained photographs, and then, like I say, since there's so many players still out there, they may not be able to to be articulate on camera where they don't want to, where they would want to avoid that. But nothing stops them from, taking a look, looking at a nice request letter, as well as maybe peppered with a few questions, and correspondents can strike up, and they might sign the photo, return it, and I've experienced that not only in football but in baseball as well, to ask stuff. So I'm getting these signed photographs, but I'm also getting a piece of history answered to me.
Oh, most definitely. So many older players still appreciate hearing from fans as compared to the younger players or newer players, and it's just very heartwarming, especially when I know you reach out to an older player, he's not forgotten, and he really appreciates the fan base, and they do their darndest to try to sign the whatever you send them, a card or a photo or whatever it may be. And it's great preserving their history, and their history needs to be preserved, to say the least. So that's a great collectible. I don't care, and it's priceless as far as I'm concerned. You can't put a value on it in any way, shape, or form. It's truly amazing. You know, the one thing with the magazine, just to work Gridiron Greats magazine, and we have several former players who read the magazine, and I do correspond with some of them, and they prefer keeping their identities from the public because they enjoy their privacy. So, and I respect that. I have no problem with that. We've also had some players who've had a cup of coffee in the NFL who read the magazine, and they enjoy, you know, being remembered for whatever they have. And again, that whole part of our game is so very, very important to keep. And that's one thing I always said with the magazine. I know John and I, we've talked about it, and Joe and I have talked about it over the years. You know, you got to preserve the history of the game. If you're not going to preserve the history of the game, there won't be any game for the future and future generation. And that's very important.
Right.
And John, with what you do with your show, is just that. You're you know, calling older players, so on and so forth. It's you know, they love to talk, and they want to be heard. And it's true, you're not a true sports person interviewing them, being that, you know, well, why'd you do this? Why'd you hold out for this? You know, what happened in the locker room here? So, you know, there's a lot more to their lives and to the game than just that. And I think that's what's lost with sports reporting today. That's why it's a chore for me to watch a sportscast today. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, the draft is a good example. I turned it on. I couldn't take it after about 5-10 minutes. I shut it off. I put it back on 10-15 minutes later. Okay, the only thing I hit upon was Belichick's dog, which I thought was probably the highlight of the whole the draft. Watching him and seeing the dog behind the, I thought that was great. It really did. It was amazing. John, we're almost out of time. I want to ask website information for the show and any website information on you.
Oh, to see the program, Beyond the Game, one only has to go to wpcommunitymedia.org. It is a municipal-run studio, so I would not have selected a long, lengthy name like that, but WP, which stands for White Plains, communitymedia.org. So it's wpcommunitymedia.org, and there's an entire web page regarding Beyond the Game, and most of the shows are posted up there. I have 5,000 episodes in the can, so there's just so much the computer can take.
Wow. We only got like 100, and I think this is the 108th podcast, so we're way behind. We gotta get caught up. John, thank you for taking time. Thank you for taking time out and being on the other side this time. And I promise you, I'll be back up there for another show. I just got to figure out what to bring this time that's different than the other shows, and I'm sure I can dig something out of the archives here. John Barparian. John, thank you for being on the show this evening.
John,
thank you, Bob. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're almost out of time. We're going to go into our 2-minute warning and wrap up on the show. Joe, I'm going to hand off to you. What'd you pick up on tonight's show?
What a great guy. Seriously, what a great guy. The whole time I was doing that, I was thinking about you being on his show. And does he call you the captain, or how does he refer to you as?
No, we're on first name basis, John and Bob, so that's all right. Oh, wow. There's only a few people that call me the captain.
Yeah,
remember that. So.
I can aspire someday to be on a first name basis with you, Bob. So.
True.
No,
true.
what a great
Very
guy.
True.
I really enjoyed a couple of his shows that I watched. He's great interviewer, very lively, just a great guest. Thank you for bringing him on, Bob.
Yeah, it's fun being on his show. I leave the studio and we head back home. Brenda normally comes up with me and she goes shopping there's a Macy's Plaza across the street. This last time that she came up, she just stayed there in the studio listening. But anyways, we talk about the show on the way back, and we stop to have dinner somewhere before we get back home here in Wallingford. So it's a nice break. I like being on the air like that too. I can show some stuff and great questions, John. Like I said, it's like a rapid fire, back and forth questions and answers, and it's fun. It's a fun show to do, and I appreciate it. And like I said, and he does preserve the history of the game with his guests, and that's what I like seeing. I want to. I got like about 65, about a minute and a half here. Have you heard anything more with what's going on with the National in Atlantic City at the end of July? Because I'm hearing it does not sound like it's going to be going on. Have you heard anything about it one way or the other, Joe?
Ditto. Via other chat rooms, I heard it's not going on. And it's mostly coming from dealers who are, dealers who are not hearing from the National Committee, whereas normally right now they'd be reaching out talking about, setups. So the lack of communication is the information here.
Yeah, my gut feeling it'll be canceled and they will postpone it. And if, like Comic-Con, I know got postponed until 2021, and I would not doubt that they should. And this is just my opinion. They should just cancel for 2020 and then just go with next July 2021, wherever it's going to be. And you just lost a year. There's not much to do about it. I just can't see it going off one way or the other. I don't see even in the fall. I can't see it.
First of August, we should have a gathering of football collectors at the Wallingford, Connecticut compound.
I could section off 6 feet in the yard and set up chairs everywhere, and I'll have my megaphone and I'll be shouting out. And I just got to figure out how I can lay the food out so everybody can eat afterwards or whatever. Unbelievable. Anyways, we're almost out of time. Thanks for listening, Joe. Thanks for being on. John, thanks for being on. Appreciate it. We'll be back hopefully in a week or so with another episode of Gridiron Greats, the podcast. In the interim, don't forget our latest issue. Issue number 68 is out and available. If you're not a subscriber, check out our website at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. Until that time, thanks for listening.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.